So before we get started, I have a couple of announcements to make. First off, yes, those are indeed birthday decorations. I'm hosting a private little birthday party for Mustafa Mien, aka Moose, aka the host of the Moving Mouths podcast. He's a longtime friend of mine, a regular contributor to the Metal Meltdown. So why don't you all be nice for like 5 minutes? Say, happy birthday, Moose, happy birthday, Moving Mouths, in the comments below. I'd appreciate that. And second, I'm going to direct your attention quickly to a new video from Metal Forge Reviews, in which I joined the Metal Forge Reviews cast and we talked about some really cool doom metal from 2020. I don't always get the chance to talk about a lot of doom metal on the Metal Meltdown because I always try and review as much stuff from across the metal spectrum as possible, so this was a cool opportunity to learn about some doom, to talk about some doom, and of course just to hang out and make something cool with a couple of really cool dudes. The link to that video will be in the description of this video. Make sure you subscribe to Metal Forge Reviews if you liked that video and you want to see more like it. Booyah! Now that that's out of the way, we can talk about this new album from King 810. Or is it King 810? Or is it King 810? You know what? For simplicity's sake, we're gonna call him King. Start the review! AK Concerto number 47, 11th movement in G major, is the fourth studio album from King, an American metal crew that has spent the last decade as kind of the poster boys for this modern wave of nu metal and rap metal. With a sound that blends these two genres with new influences from the world of deathcore, from the world of underground hip-hop, then infusing that with some surprisingly mature, emotionally vulnerable, and powerful storytelling, with frontman and primary songwriter David Gunn often singing about his experiences growing up in poverty, growing up on the streets, dealing with alcoholism, drug abuse, gang violence. Now, nu metal has always been an emotionally vulnerable and transparent genre, so to some extent, some of the things King has been talking about isn't exactly brand new, but there is a certain sincerity and maturity to everything that King talks about that isn't necessarily always found within records from, say, Limp Bizkit, or Evanescence, or Papa Roach. And as a result, while I can't say I've ever consistently been a fan, I have mostly appreciated everything that King has put out there. But a lot has changed in the last couple of years. King has a lot more competition now in 2020 than they did in, say, 2015. The fact is, more and more deathcore bands are continuing to experiment with nu metal, and on top of that, it's worth noting that there are a lot of underground hip-hop bands existing right now heavily influenced by nu metal and by the broader spectrums of extreme music. Ghostmain, Horror, Backwash, Scarlord, City Morgue, Fever 333, the list goes on and on, folks. And real talk, folks, this is becoming less and less of some underground phenomenon. This is becoming the next evolution of rock music. For God's sakes, just last week, mainstream hip-hop artist Doja Cat released a metal remix of her hit single, Say So. For these reasons, I was really hoping that the band would kick things up a notch on this new album, AK Concerto, especially when I was pretty lukewarm at best towards their last studio album, Suicide King. But unfortunately, it's becoming clear to me that King is either uninterested in keeping up or incapable of keeping up, because this is hands down the band's most immature, predictable, and cringeworthy record to date. The emotional maturity, honesty, and complexity of previous records is gone, as is the restraint and the subtlety. Instead of attempting to adapt and evolve their sound in any significant way, King are comfortable just spouting out nu metal cliches and tropes and stereotypes, pumping out some generic breakdowns, pumping out some super deranged, over-the-top vocals, pumping out a lot of really overproduced percussion and keyboard parts and industrial soundscapes, and some of their most immature, outright juvenile fucking lyrics yet. The track Red Queen is a fantastic example of everything I'm talking about. From start to finish, the track is overflowing with generic, dirgy, deathcore nu metal riffs, a lot of weird vocal samples, a lot of weird percussion, a lot of glitchy sound effects and samples. They are trying so hard to create a naturally eerie, disturbing, and deranged atmosphere that it backfires completely. It gets especially corny once you start to pay attention to the lyrics, which boil down to David Gunn essentially bragging about how tough he is, how cool he is, how many guns he has. Writing here, my bitch got a ass like the moon, she keep my pistol in her lap when we cruise. They gave me your dream, I laughed. They can't control me, but they can't give me back. I don't play nice. Going on to say, we go fuck hoes and we shoot guns, we don't care. I'm from the Midwest. Industry ain't make me know. Not who they want me to be. That's why they hate me. Red Queen is definitely the worst offender here, but that's not to say that any other tracks do significantly better. Objectively better, but not significantly. Take, for instance, the tracks Hellhounds and Love Under Will, the former of which settling on a very generic and predictable deathcore flow, the latter of which settling on a very generic and predictable kind of underground hip-hop flow. Both edgy as hell to the point of being outright cheesy, David Gunn kind of ranting, raving, screaming, and mumbling to his heart's content like some kind of NPC out of Arkham Asylum. The track Dukes is especially confusing. A lot of the riffs and, of course, the vocal melodies seem to hearken to some of the industrial noise swagger of mid-90s White Zombie, and that just doesn't really fuse well with what King is already doing on this album. It's hands down one of the messiest cuts on the record. Then you got a track like Love Bomb, which sounds like the kind of thing I could picture like a really pissed off teenager scribbling on the back of their notebook. One of the most repetitive cuts on the record, to the point where we could probably make some kind of sick, twisted drinking game out of it. I do kind of appreciate the track House of Dust. It has some of the band's strongest lyrics on the record. It has David Gunn's strongest vocal performance on the record. It is appropriately melodramatic and seems to bring King back to some of the more realistic and gritty environments in which they previously existed. But aside from that, this album is pretty much consistently David Gunn just kind of acting like an edgy, pissed-off teenager for like 40 minutes. Yo, I'm a fucking gangster and I'm so tough. I live in Michigan and I own a gun. I will fucking kill you. I will fuck you up. We live in a society. I'll fuck your girlfriend in the butt. Like, seriously, that is what you are going to hear for a majority of this album's runtime, along with some very over-the-top vocals, some very overproduced instrumentals and soundscapes, and some incredibly generic, predictable, cookie-cutter deathcore and nu metal songcraft. I'm just not feeling this one fucking bit. I struggled to listen to this thing all the way through, even on my first listen. I'm giving this a 1 out of 5. I think this fucking thing's terrible. If you really want to hear some aggressive hip-hop and some aggressive underground metal fused together, then go listen to literally any of the other artists I mentioned at the beginning of this fucking video. Hell, go listen to that fucking Doja Cat remix. There is far more of substance and value and taste in those bands, in that one track, than there is on the entirety of this album. I'm sure that longtime fans will still very much appreciate this album and still very much appreciate what King is bringing to the table on this thing, and good for you, honestly, but I'm not fucking feeling it. And even if I was kind of feeling it, the fact still remains there is way better hip-hop and metal fusion going on in so many other places. Like, there's not a single thing on this album that Ghostman does not do way better on his most recent album, Anti-Icon. There is nothing on this album that Clipping does not do way better on their most recent album, Visions of Bodies Being Burned. Nothing. Not a fucking thing. And frankly, again, even just by the standards of King's previous studio albums, it's just not especially entertaining or authentic or engaging. At least, not for me. 1 out of 5, this is a fucking terrible record. It's probably not going to end up on my worst albums of the year list, but really only because there have been so many other albums that are so objectively fucking worse. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.